Hey, good afternoon. Welcome. Bem-vindos e bem-vindas to our symposium, United States and Brazil, 200 Years of Diplomatic Relations. It is a great honor to have you all here with us today. The event is organized by the Brazil Lab at the Princeton Institute for International and Regional Studies in partnership with the Brazilian Consulate General in New York and the Embassy of Brazil in Washington, D.C. We are also extremely grateful to our co-sponsors, the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs, the Program Latin American Studies, the Department of Anthropology, and the Department of Spanish and Portuguese. My name is Miquel Mugi, and I'm the Academic Research Manager here at the Brazil Lab. We began planning this event a year ago after Ambassador Sena Ganem visited us here in Princeton in September 2023. This symposium is the result of a long-term collaboration, which we are very proud to have developed and continue to nourish. The United States recognized the Brazilian independence, at the time an empire in the making, on May 26, 1824, when President James Monroe received Brazil's chargé d'affaires to the United States, José Silvestre Rebelo, in Washington, D.C. Nearly a year later, on March 9, 1826, Conde Iragué was appointed as the first U.S. chargé d'affaires to Brazil. We are here today to reflect on both the history and the future of these relations, and we couldn't ask for a better company. To tell us more about the format of today's event and introduce our distinguished guests, I would now like to hand the microphone to Thomas Fujiwara, Professor of Economics and Associate Director of the Brazil Lab. Thank you.
Thank you, Miquel. Thanks everyone for coming. So as Miquel said, I'm a professor at the Economics Department at the School of Public and International Affairs, and I co-direct the Brazil Lab with João Bill, who is in Brazil right now. He's well-deserved sabbatical leave. Professor Deborah Yashar, the Peers Director, due to a last-minute unforeseen circumstance, could not make it today to do her opening remarks, but she sends her regrets to all. She's very much looking forward to it. So without much more ado, just let me tell you about the format for today and introduce our speakers. So we're very pleased, very happy to have here today Maria Luiza Ribeiro Viotti. She, the current ambassador of Brazil to the United States. Ambassador Viotti was previously the cabinet chief for the United Nations Secretary General. Earlier, she was Brazil's ambassador to Germany and the permanent representative of Brazil to the UN, where she led the Brazilian delegation at the UN Security Council and presided over the very same council in February 2011. Like myself, Ambassador Viotti is an economist by training. She worked both in Brazil and abroad before all the titles I just listed on a range of topics from regional cooperation to trade and investment promotion. So before Ambassador Viotti speaks, we'll hear opening remarks from Ambassador Sena Ganem, who's currently the Consul General of Brazil in New York City. Previously, he served as Consul General in other outposts in the United States, including Miami and San Francisco. He's a lawyer by training, and Ambassador Ganem participated in several missions at the United Nations and other multilateral organizations. Then last but not least, after Ambassador Viotti speaks, we'll hear comments from Brian Winter, the Editor-in-Chief of Americas Quarterly and the Vice President for Policy of the American Society and the Council of Americas. He's one of Latin America's most influential political analysts, having lived in Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina as a correspondent for Reuters. He's the author of several books, including The Accidental President of Brazil with Fernando Henrique Cardoso, and I just learned from him in 2025, also who read a short book about São Paulo, guiding to visitors to the city. So after Brian Winter speaks, Miquel will collect some questions from the audience briefly, and then we'll aim to end everything sharply at 6. So yeah, without further ado, get the word to Ambassador Sena Ganem.
Boa tarde. Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to return to Princeton, and I have the great honor to accompany Ambassador Maria Luiza Viotti, a great friend of mine. And thank you, Thomas, for your words. I would like also to thank Miquel. We have a very fruitful meeting on September, and this in certain way is the result of this meeting, this workshop today. And Brian, I read your book. It was very interesting, and I participated in some of the events that you tell them. So, as we said and Thomas said, we had on September last year a meeting here at the Brazil Lab, which is, I would say, a model in terms of international relations and promoting relations and the ideas between Brazil and the United States. And we started to establish a program of work. Today is the highlight, let's say, of this program. We just beginning thought about this event and bringing Ambassador Maria Luiza to speak to you. And so we are here today. But besides that, we have been working literature in a program, Brazil Consciência, Professor Vinicius Duarte worked with us in this program. Portuguese language as a second language. Itamar Vieira, Brazilian author, released the English version of his best-selling book at Princeton, Torto Arado. And next year, we will be working with the Princeton as a partner in the workshop in Brazilian Researchers Diaspora. And I don't know if you guys already know, but we are counting on you for a partnership in energy transition with a seminar with Fundação Getúlio Vargas, also in the beginning of next year.
Surprise. Yes.
So, excellent. As I said, this 200 years of diplomatic relations celebration is the highlight of our program. And I have the great privilege, we have the great privilege of having Ambassador Luiza Viotti here today with us. My role here was to introduce her, but Thomas said, well, not all, but I would like to say some words. She is, I think, I consider her, and she's very discreet, but I tell anyway, one of the most seasoned professionals, the diplomats of Brazil in our generation, not today, in our generation, and huge experience in many fields, and in terms of opening the way for women. He is the first Brazilian woman ambassador in Washington, the first Brazilian woman permanent representative to the United Nations, the first Brazilian diplomat as chief of staff of the United Nations. So you open many ways, and I think you are proud. With such credentials, I think my one unique role would be to introduce her, but I will say just, I address just 2 points. First, to recommend you book Encounters. We were speaking about it. It's a historical and factual narrative of the bilateral relations, 200 years of bilateral relations. It was produced by the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and American Chamber of Commerce and organized by Gonçalo Mourão. And I had the opportunity to tell some of the stories or the facts of the encounters of the book on our National Day celebration in New York. And just to give you a hint of the facts and curiosities and encounters, I will tell you that certainly Professor Michael know about it much better than myself. 24 Jewish Dutch expelled from Recife by the Portuguese, Bahia, in 1654, went to New York, and they were, like say, they created the first Jewish community in New York and contributed to the development of the city. And New York, since then, played a very important role in our bilateral relations. And second, to convey to you all, Professor Michaelis, that it is our priority. The program with Princeton is a program that we have with the main universities of now 9 area of consulate general area of jurisdiction, and of course the embassy participated in all in every program. But Princeton for now is our main priority. Okay. And we attribute a great relevance to the program, and we hope to strengthen the program. So now I thank you so much for your presence, and it's my great pleasure and my great honor to give the floor to Ambassador Luiza Viotti.
Thank you so much, Adalio, for your kind and generous words. He's a friend, so you have to give a little discount to what he has said. But in fact, I am very honored to be the first woman ambassador to Washington. I only think it happened a little bit too late. We should have had a woman ambassador before. The same for the UN, for Germany, where I was also the first woman ambassador. But things are improving in Brazil, and we now have a woman who is the deputy foreign minister for the first time. We also have new women ambassadors being nominated to important positions abroad, so things are improving, and this is very good news. But I wanted to start by thanking Professor Michael Smugli and Professor Thomas Fujiwara for the invitation to be here, to the Brazil Lab also. My great thanks. Thank you, Adalio, for also conceiving this project. And it's really a great honor and pleasure to be here today and speak to you on the bicentennial of relations between Brazil and the US. And 200 years is indeed a remarkable milestone. It is certainly an opportunity to look back, to reflect on what we have achieved so far, and to celebrate the present. But it is also a great opportunity to commit to working together and to build an even stronger partnership. So 200 years ago, on May 26th, President James Monroe received José Silvestre Rebelo, the Brazilian Chargé d'Affaires, and this made the United States one of the first countries in recognizing Brazilian independence. Some people say it's the first, it was the first. There are some who say Argentina was the first country to recognize. We in Brazil say, yes, Argentina recognized Brazil's independence first, 1823. So it makes, for us, the US the second country to recognize Brazilian independence. But in any way, this early act of friendship set the tone for a relationship that would flourish over the years and weather many storms. And as Minister Mauro Vieira said, pointed out during a seminar in Brasilia last May, celebrating the bicentennial of our relations, one of our longest lasting friendships would also become one of the most important and solid. And an interesting fact, and little known fact, is that Pedro II, the Emperor of Brazil, was the first head of state to visit the United States. He came in 1876 during the celebration of the centennial of American independence. And he was present at the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia and demonstrated Graham Bell's telephone at the exhibition. And it seems that it became a main event in disseminating the knowledge about the telephone and the use of the telephone. So I think that Pedro II left a positive impression about Brazil as a nation that values art and the sciences. And as Brazil transitioned to a republic, it drew inspiration from the American model for our first republic constitution. And this underscores the shared values of democracy and rule of law that have long underpinned our relationship. Through the 19th century, our bonds deepened, trade expanded, and cultural exchanges blossomed. And the US emerged as Brazil's main trading partner and a significant source of investments. The 20th century brought the world closer, but also presented new challenges. The two world wars saw us stand together. Brazil, the only South American nation to fight alongside the Allies, sent troops to Europe in World War II, a testament to the strength of our bond. And here, if you permit me a personal comment, my father-in-law was one of those Brazilian volunteers who joined the Allies in the Italian campaign. He was very proud of it. He wrote a book about it. And so we have a family story about those bonds of friendship between Brazil and the US as well. The post-war era brought close cooperation on regional security and economic development. And the creation of Embrapa, the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation, epitomizes this cooperation. Its history has a strong connection with the US, which began in 1950 with a partnership between Purdue University and the Brazilian Federal University of Viçosa. And Embrapa, for those who has heard of it, has since become one of the finest agricultural research and innovation corporations, providing the technological foundation that turned Brazil into one of the largest, most efficient, and sustainable food producers in the world. As we navigate the 21st century's complexities, wars, geopolitical tensions, climate change, poverty, food insecurity, and rising inequality, the Brazil-US relationship remains dynamic and resilient. President Lula's visit to Washington last February was a very important signal which conveyed a message of the importance that we attach to our relations with the United States and our interest in expanding our cooperation even further. We're making progress in many different areas. Bilateral trade is growing, it's robust, diversified, generating a flow of goods and services between our borders to the tune of billions of dollars. Last year, I think it was $75 billion. This year, we expect it's going to grow to maybe $90 billion. And investment remains strong. The United States remains Brazil's main origin of foreign direct investment, and the flows continue to grow and become more important, as highlighted by recent announcements of significant new U.S. investment projects from companies such as GM, Cloud HQ, Atlas Lithium, Kellogg, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, and others. It is also worth noting that Brazilian companies have increasingly invested in the U.S., and this was a novelty for me. I was surprised to learn about it and to also see the figures, because such investments have already reached $43 billion, also contributing to generate wealth and jobs in this country. But our relationship goes much beyond trade. Our partnership is also expanding in areas such as energy, health, science, and technology. One of the most significant areas of collaboration is environmental sustainability, environmental protection, and sustainable development. The many affinities and convergences between our two countries right now regarding public policies are reflected, for instance, in efforts to support energy transition and the drive towards a low-carbon economy. And this has opened new avenues for cooperation. Brazil, as you know, has made significant progress in fighting deforestation, which was reduced by 50% last year and by an additional 48% in the first semester of this year. mainstreaming sustainability goals in public policies, and advancing regulatory frameworks for the energy transition and the green economy. New regulations are expected to be adopted soon to establish a carbon credits market and a national program for green diesel, biogas, biomethane, sustainable aviation fuels, and offshore wind energy. Brazil has also recently adopted a framework initiative to support clean hydrogen production. And I was very glad to hear from the Secretary of Energy, Ms. Jennifer Granholm, that according to studies, and she also endorsed this view, Brazil and the US are well positioned to become the leading producers and exporters of clean hydrogen in a decade. And she added that the US is doing a major effort in this regard with subsidies and so on, hubs, regional hubs all over the country. And Brazil will probably reach this same stage without so much incentives because of the abundance of natural resources, clean energy, and I think that she is right, and we are betting very much on this and proposing a partnership with the US so that we can accelerate this process and jointly develop such industry, which will be certainly one of the major industries in the coming years, and also a leading instrument to allow us to achieve the climate change goals. I would also mention that the good performance of the Brazilian economy and recent developments in our reform agenda, in particular the adoption of a very important tax reform, also bodes well for the expansion of our partnership. Likewise, the drive towards more resilient supply chains here in the US also opens up opportunities for greater complementarity between our economies. The private sector is fully on board. Sustainability featured very high on the agenda of the major business and trade missions that we received in Brazil, and also the ones that we have sent to the US over the past year. And they also featured very high on the agenda of our CEO Forum, which met last December. And the CEO Forum is a very interesting mechanism that we have because it's a dialogue that involves the governments on both sides, the Secretary of Commerce on the American side, and our Vice President as Minister of Industry and Trade in Brazil, together with 12 representatives of the private sector on each side. And it's very interesting because the private sector meets separately and they work on recommendations for the governments, and then the governments meet with the private sector and discuss those recommendations. And it was very interesting to see how convergent those recommendations were and how much they speak to this new phase of our relationship in which energy transition, renewable energies, a low carbon economy play such an important role. Regarding supply chain resilience, both countries are interested in supporting private sector efforts in areas such as semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, critical minerals, and renewable energies. And while our cooperation, as you know, also extends to education, culture, science, and technology, the exchange of knowledge and expertise between our universities, research institutions, and private sectors has spurred innovation and progress in various fields. There is an increasing number of Brazilian universities seeking greater international visibility and partnership with American institutions. And according to recent US government data, Brazil ranks 9th in terms of the origin of foreign students in the US. So the number of students is also increasing a lot. And we see many more Brazilian students seeking undergraduate and graduate courses here in the US. In Washington, plans are underway to inaugurate a Brazilian lectureship at Johns Hopkins University this year. It's going to be our first lectureship in Washington. I don't know whether we have one in New York, but this one we have been encouraging it, and we think that it's going to expand opportunities for the promotion of Brazilian culture, the Portuguese language, and discussions about topics involving Brazil in Washington and in the US. As it is customary each year, a significant delegation of Brazilian higher education institutions attended the Association of International Educators, NAFSA, conference in New Orleans in May. And I would also like to mention that the Fulbright, which is very active in Brazil, launched a very interesting initiative focused on the Amazon. It's called Fulbright Amazonia. And this initiative brings together researchers from countries in the region. Colombia is a major partner in this as well, to propose solutions to the rainforest's challenges. And the first edition will conclude with a gathering in Washington at the end of the year, and the new one is already being planned. The second iteration will take place next year. On the cultural front, the bicentennial celebrations also give us a very good platform to showcase Brazilian culture. We have organized a number of events, such as art exhibitions, musical performances, bringing together Brazilian musicians with the US musicians, such as the concert we had at the Kennedy Center with Hamilton de Holanda and the American saxophonist Chris Potter, which was amazing. It's impressive how they play so well together and how the music, there is a perfect dialogue between Brazilian samba and bossa nova and US jazz. So this also goes to show of how important culture is for those bonds, for expanding those bonds, and people-to-people relations also contribute so much to our relationship. And also at the end of the month, the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington will launch the largest retrospective exhibition of the work of the Brazilian artists Os Gêmeos. Those who know Os Gêmeos can appreciate that this is going to be something very interesting, very big. It will be there for a year. So please come and visit, and I think you will like to see Os Gêmeos in Washington, D.C. Let me also mention our work on human rights, which is very important on our agenda. Presidents Lula and Biden launched a partnership for workers' rights last September on the margins of the United Nations General Assembly. And this demonstrates our shared commitment to fighting exploitation, promoting decent work, and facing the challenges posed to the labor force in the digital area. I would also like to mention that we reactivated our mechanisms of cooperation, such as the Working Group on Global Human Rights, which met last year, and the JPER, the Joint Action Plan to Eliminate Racial and Ethnic Discrimination and Promote Equality. This also highlights the importance of human rights and inclusion on our agenda. And as you know, our societies share a past marked by the impact of slavery and can benefit from joint work and exchange of experiences in overcoming such challenges. So the JPER aims at doing exactly that, with the participation of civil society, very strong participation of civil society, and marginalized groups, ethnic groups, and racial groups. And in the meeting that was held last year, we advanced discussions on education, health, justice, and law enforcement, together with memory and culture. And as I conclude, I'd like also to refer to the fact that this is a very important year for Brazil's international agenda, as we're chairing the G20 and preparing to host COP30 next year. And we have chosen 3 priorities for our presidency. One is social inclusion and the fight against hunger and poverty. The second is energy transition and the fight against climate change. And the third is the reform of global governance institutions. And the United States has been a fundamental partner in this work. So to conclude, I'd like to say that in this bicentennial year, Brazil is determined to continue to leverage our shared interests and the vitality and dynamism of our long-standing cooperation with the U.S. to build an even stronger partnership with tangible, long-term results for both societies and a positive impact for our region and beyond. Thank you very much.
Madam Ambassador, thank you so much for your words. Ambassador Adalneo, Miqueias, obrigado pelo convite. Boa tarde. I have spent the last 25 years trying to explain Brazil to Americans and trying to explain the United States to Brazilians. This year I've spent more doing the latter. My wife is half Brazilian. My children are Brazilian passport holders. My son, whose name is Adrian, still insists after 9 years living in New York on going by Adriano and prefers Picanha to New York Strip. So I think it's clear proof that there are things about Brazil that stay with people. And we lived in Sao Paulo from 2010 to 2015. But I also think that even after 200 years, there are things about Brazil that are sometimes difficult for Americans to understand. And, you know, the notion that there is a large democracy in Latin America that is neither automatically aligned with nor automatically aligned against the United States is still difficult to compute for a lot of people, especially in Washington. That said, I do think, and this is just my personal impression, I do think we're at something of a high point right now. I think that there's a respect for Brazil, for its importance, and an understanding of the global role, not just the regional role, but the global role that it can play and is playing in areas like the G20, climate change, defense of democracy, food security, energy security, the green transition, and all of the many other things that Ambassador Viotti mentioned. I would also cite most recently with the difficult situation unfolding in Venezuela that the Biden administration has looked to the Lula government as a leader in those conversations in an effort to try to achieve some kind of democratic transition or at least stability there. And that is testimony to the hard work of many Brazilian diplomats over the years and also the wonderful cultural ambassadors that the country's had. I had the pleasure of helping Pelé write a book 10 years ago. And I would note that, you know, figures like Sergio Mendes, who of course passed away this week, have been important. And I think we've come a long way. I really do, even in the last couple of years. But, you know, we mentioned the fact that it was James Monroe who recognized Brazil. And here we are in the year 2024, and there are still people in the United States who are talking about the Monroe Doctrine. And so I think that that battle to recognize the importance and the complexity of Brazil, and the rest of Latin America, but I think particularly Brazil, is something that we're all still fighting on a day-to-day basis. I think programs like the Brazil Lab are so important to making sure that that consciousness exists, and events like this one today are also very important as well. So thank you again for the invitation to be part of it and for your words also. So I think I'm supposed to ask 2 or 3 questions, and then we open it up to the audience. My first one is a little bit related to what I was just saying, and it's, you know, you've been ambassador in Germany, in the United States. What, in your mind, is the most challenging thing for Americans, in this case, to understand about Brazil?
I think you nailed it. But first of all, let me say that it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've been reading your articles for a long time, and I appreciate so much the way you convey to Americans, as you said, what Brazil means, what the role, our role is, what we try to do. So I think that it's very good to have someone like you that is able to, having been there and experienced our reality, have been able to participate in this debate, in this discussion with such great quality. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
But I think the most challenging thing is really to try to convey to an American audience, especially in the government, not so much in the Department of State, because I think there is an understanding about Brazil's positions, where we come from, and why it is that we are not absolutely aligned in all matters with the United States. But it's more difficult when this conversation takes place in Congress, for instance, where there is a sense that China is a great threat for the U.S., and Brazil should be together with the U.S. and against China. So it's difficult to explain, or not difficult, but I think it's difficult for them to understand that Brazil has a different kind of perspective in some of the issues. It doesn't mean that we are against the U.S. It just means that we have different interests and a different perspective. And somebody once said, and I think that this is a very interesting sentence, where you stand depends on where you sit, right? So in Brazil, we sit in a region that is largely peaceful. One of our most interesting diplomats once said that Brazil is in a kind of a strategic haven, because we are not in the middle of conflict. We are not in the Middle East, for instance. We are not facing great security problems. And Brazil has lived in peace for more than 100 years with all its neighbors. We have 10 neighbors. And this is a major achievement, I think. And it's not by chance. We have worked on it. We have, our diplomacy has been focusing on it for a long time. We have had projects of cooperation. Mercosul is an initiative from the 80s that meant to bring together Brazil and Argentina first, and then the other countries of the Southern Cone in a development program, a program that would allow us to develop together as neighboring countries, as a group. So there have been many initiatives and many efforts to keep the region as much as possible as a stable region. So for us, peace is something that we value very much, and we value diplomacy because this is how we achieved peace in our region, and we also value a kind of universalist approach to our foreign relations. So we want to be able to have trade with everyone because our trade is very much diversified. We have very important trade relations with Europe, with the United States, with China, with Asian countries, with Africa. So we want to be able to talk to everyone, to trade with everyone. That's in our genes, so to say. And this is why sometimes our perspectives are different. And so this is maybe the main challenge, to try to explain why we're different, and that we should remain friends. And this is natural among friends also to have different perspectives. There's no problem with that.
You mentioned so many opportunities or so many areas in which there's collaboration happening between the United States and Brazil. I'm going to ask you like a journalist's question here,
Okay.
which is, what is like the one area that you think is kind of underexploited right now when it comes to those ties between the two countries?
I think science and technology, it's something that we have tried to develop further, and it's been a little difficult. Because I think that there isn't so much that we can do in terms of governments. I think governments can stimulate, can promote, and so on, but it remains the realm of research institutions, academia, and so on, to develop those interactions further. But I think that this is something that we have, by the way, a bilateral commission on science and technology. It should have met last year, but we were not able to organize it. I hope that it still meets either this year or maybe next year. And I think that there are many interesting projects that we could develop together on AI, on sustainable aviation fuels. Brazil is doing a lot in many different, through many different routes. The US is developing other forms of, other paths to get to the same objective, sustainable aviation fuel. So I think there is a lot of space for cooperation, and we need to find the way of creating the space for this to happen.
My last question, and then we'll open it up. Let me ask a question that I am sure is on everyone's mind, which is, we're in an election here in the United States. You may have noticed. What has your philosophy been in handling that as a diplomat, especially considering that one of the candidates was more aligned with the previous administration in Brazil?
Yes, well, our philosophy as diplomats, as public servants, is to say that regardless of who wins, we'll continue to work very closely together, and we'll continue to try to expand our cooperation. But we know it can be a little bit more difficult, less difficult. But what we do is to try to follow very closely what's happening. I attended both conventions. The Department of State has a very interesting practice of organizing a visit for the diplomatic corps to the conventions and to the programs that happen on the side. So this was very interesting to get to know people involved in the campaigns, and to learn more about the policies of the two different camps. And so this is a very good source of information for us in order to allow us to plan ahead of time what the strategies should be in each case. And that's what we are trying to do.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that one.
Good. So we have time for Q&A, and perhaps a good format is to bunch the questions in groups of 3, so more people can speak. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand, and I will go over to you. Okay, we've got a question right there. Yeah, I can go.
Thank you. I'll ask the question in English. Ambassador Viotti, I wanted you to know that you have a legion of fans, not only in Brazil, where I'm from, but also at the UN, where I work. And your legacy is very much felt there. And thank you for opening doors. With all your different hats, as ambassador to the UN, as chief of staff of the UN under Antonio Guterres, could you please talk a little bit about a new multilateralism? And now at the General Assembly, there will be a discussion of a potential update of the Security Council and the veto power system. And at the same time, it's a different multipolar world, and you see the expansion of the BRICS right now. Could you please relay a little bit about Brazil's stance and as we move ahead and with the different challenges that we see, particularly that really no country borders, and how we could deal with this in a different way?
Thank you. One more question? Yes.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to meet you, Ambassador. My question is also along the multilateral lines. I work at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency on our G7 and G20 team. So I myself, as an American, have been learning lots about working with Brazil this past year. And it's been a real pleasure to watch your G20 process unfold. And my question would be, what would you consider to be a successful G20 at the Leaders Summit in November? What are the key deliverables that you'd be getting out of the various tracks that you would deem it to be a success?
Okay.
We have one more right here in the front.
Hi, Ambassador. Thank you so much for being here with us. My name is Dylan. I'm in the Spanish and Portuguese department here. And I have a question in a sort of different direction about cultural diplomacy. And you mentioned the kind of wealth of musical shows as well as exhibitions. I'm currently right now at the American Folk Art Museum in New York helping to organize an exhibit of a Brazilian artist. And so the American Folk Art Museum in New York City. The artist is Madalena Santos Reimbold. But that's sort of besides the point. I was wondering more like, so when helping to organize cultural events, at what point do your tastes come to play there, or how do you support I'm just sort of wondering how does someone in an ambassadorial position weigh different tastes and interests, and how does something like that come to play in abroad? Thank you.
Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, to the first question, yeah, that's a big question. So let me try to focus on what Brazil is trying to do. And as you know, Brazil has long advocated for a reform of the Security Council to make it more representative of the current political realities and also more diversified and more effective. And in the G20, we have chosen governance, international governance, and multilateral institutions as focus. We have had a number of discussions in working groups and also at ministerial level in Brasilia. And we're planning a meeting at the UN on the margins of the General Assembly, which would be an opportunity for the G20 ministers of foreign affairs to engage with the broader membership and discuss Security Council reform. It's been a very difficult discussion, of course. It's taken many years. But I think that there is now, in light of what's happening in the world, the geostrategic tensions and the feeling that the Security Council is not being able to respond to those challenges, maybe has created an atmosphere that would allow for some kind of effort or even some kind of a movement in this discussion. And one interesting aspect of it is the fact that the U.S. is now engaged. The U.S. has not been engaged in the previous discussions, and they are now part of the discussions. And in fact, they're going to make an important announcement today. I haven't received it yet, but they are going to say something about Security Council reform. President Biden has included this in his three statements to the General Assembly, and about the interest that the U.S. has in promoting reform and the expansion of the Security Council. So I hope that the current environment is one that would drive a more substantive discussion on reform of the multilateral institutions. You also mentioned BRICS, and sometimes there is also misunderstanding about what the BRICS is, what their goals are. And for us in Brazil, I happened to be in one of the first meetings in which we discussed this idea. I was the permanent representative of Brazil to the UN at that time, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister Celso Amorim, wanted to generate this discussion, so we invited the Foreign Minister of Russia, Minister Lavrov. At that time, he was already Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Chinese minister, and India. And there was a discussion. And at that time, Lavrov was not very keen. He said, "Oh, I don't know, I don't think so. And maybe if we start a discussion in this group," because, you know, everything started with the...
Jim O'Neill.
Yes, Jim O'Neill. And he said, "Oh, this is just, it's an acronym." And but Celso Amorim was very keen. India was very interested. The Chinese were also interested. So Lavrov ended up by saying, "Okay, but let's frame it as an economic cooperation. No security issues, no economic cooperation, and mainly reform of the economic multilateral institutions." Then came the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, and the emerging countries, Brazil, China, and others, were the ones that really came to the table to also contribute to resources for the World Bank and the IMF that helped in the confronting the crisis. So it became more apparent that those countries that were able to contribute at that time should also be able to have more voice and decision in those organizations. So the BRICS started to make more sense, because then we were working together to try to make proposals and enhance the participation of those countries in those organizations. And the work continues. Of course, there were some decisions, but the decisions were not implemented, and so the work continues in this area. But what makes more sense for us is the work intra-BRICS, because right now in this expanded format of 10 countries, the BRICS correspond to a third of Brazilian trade. So those are very important partners for us, and countries that we want to be able to work with and to cooperate with. So it makes sense, it continues to make sense from an economic point of view. The Russians started to bring security issues to the table, and we've tried to be a little more reluctant to discuss security issues. But I think that would be my take. On the G20 and what would be the deliverables, well, on the first priority, security, reducing inequalities and fighting hunger and poverty, we have proposed an alliance which is based on the fact that we already know over the years we have, there has been a number of initiatives, policy initiatives in many countries, in Brazil, in Latin America, in Asia, in India, in Bangladesh, policy initiatives that have proven to work in reducing poverty. So what we have done is to, together with the World Bank, an analysis of such public policies that have worked. So we have created a basket of policies, and at the same time, we, together with the World Bank and other institutions, have put in place financial mechanisms. So for countries who want to be able to benefit from those initiatives or policy projects, they could also apply for financial support. So this is an initiative that we want to be able to launch in November during the summit, and I think it would be our main deliverable for the first priority. On the second priority, we have been working also with a number of partners and multilateral institutions to put together mechanisms that would allow countries to make more ambitious NDCs. So this is something that we have been working with the UN, with the World Bank, and sometimes those mechanisms have to do with facilitating instruments that would allow countries to have more access to private funds, or funds that would also allow public money to leverage the possibility of supporting countries in the energy transition, for instance. So those are the main ideas for the second initiative. And the third one, it's the discussion at the UN that we are going to hold in the coming weeks.
And the art gallery question.
Yes, yes.
This is the one I want to hear the answer to.
Yes. Well, I try to work also to promote the cultural events that I think would be interesting. But what we are doing is we now have a Brazilian cultural institute. It's called Guimarães Rosa, and it is housed at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And they are the ones who direct us to the artists, to the exhibitions, and so they have their own process in consultation with organizations in Brazil and so on. But in the end, we need also sponsors. So it also depends very much on what the sponsors want to promote. So it's a mix. It comes from Brasilia, but there are the sponsors, and sometimes I weigh in and I try through my network also. For instance, we were able to get three nights at the Kennedy Center in a beautiful theater for Brazilian music. And in the end, we were not able to find artists that would be able to come and so on. So we managed through also networks, very informal networks, to bring Hamilton de Holanda, and because he happened to be in the US, it was easy for him to come and so on. And the same happened with a group of Brazilian musicians who are from the Clube do Choro in Brasília. Beautiful music, fantastic musicians. They also happened to be in the US, and we were able to bring them. So it really depends very much. But there is a process in Brasília that tries to consult with the civil society, with cultural institutions, and to promote especially new artists and artists that would benefit from this kind of exposure. Huh? Pode, por favor.
We present every year, the consulates with support of the embassy, a program for cultural activities the following year. And we are working at our Consulate General in New York, a program that explores diversity. Yesterday, for example, we had a fashion show of diversity with the community presenting it with designers, Brazilian designers, different kind of clothes of designers and so. If you want, you could present your idea to our consulate and we will study it. Okay? Like a project already established, not with all the details, but.
If I may add, we also work on the basis of demands coming from American institutions. For instance, we have a very good partnership with the Kennedy Center, and they had planned an activity about forests in the beginning of the year. So they asked us whether we would be able to bring something from the Amazon forest, and we were able to bring a collection of benches made by indigenous communities, beautiful benches, 70 benches. They are huge benches made in the form of animals from the Brazilian forest, jaguars, snakes, and things like that, with the wood coming from the Amazon forest. And we also brought an indigenous person who is an artist and was showing showing how the benches are made, what kind of vegetable materials that they use for coloring. So it was a fantastic exhibition, but supported by the Kennedy Center.
Great. So we have time for one more round of questions. Okay, we have a hand there, another one here. Good.
Thank you. I'm Swiss by origin, but I've been living and researching and teaching in Brazil for the past 23 years, and I'm proud and honored to have become a Brazilian citizen in 2019. Now, I live in Curitiba, and where we have a big Ukrainian community, as you know. Yes. And our preoccupations continue, our worries continue as to the situation in Ukraine. Now, obviously, that is one of the areas where the US and Brazil are not necessarily aligned in their understanding and action in that situation. And I would really hope Brazil would be able, with its differentiated position in multilateralism, to come up with a solution that might be viable. Can you tell me whether my hope is justified or where we are at this moment? Thank you.
I think, as you know, Brazil condemned the invasion as a violation of Ukrainian sovereignty, violation of international law. But at the same time, we have expressed the idea that there should be a space for negotiation, a space for dialogue between the parties. And of course, this is not the case in the moment. At the moment, the parties don't seem to be ready for negotiations. But once there is this willingness, I think Brazil would try to contribute in any form it can. Although we think that it should be up to the parties themselves to negotiate and find a solution, come to a solution. Of course, there may be facilitation by countries that speak to all sides or speak to one side and is able to bring something to bear in the negotiations. So I think that right now we don't see this space shaping itself yet, but Brazil will continue to try to propose that this is the case. We know that it would be difficult to have a discussion on a solution right now, but maybe there would be space to talk about release of prisoners, to talk about avoiding civilian casualties, things like that, that would allow for the positions to gradually come together.
You just have to turn it on.
Thank you so much for your thoughts and answers now. Ambassador Maria Luiza Ribeiro Viotti, it's such an honor to have you here. We both know that history and memory official history and official memory is a question of remembering and forgetting. As far as I know, the first country to recognize our independence was Angola, the first nation, and then England. And the reason for this, it was because they didn't want Pedro I and people from the First Empire, from First Rhine, didn't want to stop the slave trade. So we Brazilians and people from the United States, we inherited the slave system and nowadays this structural racism. As far as I know, and Brian can correct me, in the United States, black population is a minority, like 13% or 17%. But in Brazil, it's not. It's in Brazil, we talk about 56.1% of our population. So it's a major minority. So I want to hear your thoughts about this subject, that it's a very controversial one, mainly in the topic of diplomacy. How do you think, I know your position about women, no? And I want to hear you about this very complex situation because we know the consequences of being a major minority for our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. It's a very good one. And yes, it is a very difficult issue for us. I think we need to start talking about it by recognizing that there is discrimination, there is racism, and we need to try to confront it. For many years in Itamaraty, there was not this kind of acknowledgement, but from maybe how long ago? 15 years ago, we started a program. We recognized it. We recognized the importance of diversity, of having a diplomatic foreign service that would be more representative of Brazilian diversity. And we started a program which was a stipend for people of black Brazilians, to study and to facilitate their candidacy for the career, the diplomatic career. So they would have a stipend for 1 year to study and prepare themselves for the exam, because the career in Brazil is through an exam. And this allowed for a number of Brazilians of black ethnicity to not only apply, but to be approved. So nowadays we have a more diverse number of diplomats in Brazil. We have 2 ambassadors who are black, holding the position of ambassadors of Brazil abroad who are black, which is not a very high number, but it's a beginning. But what I think we have now is this recognition that we need to do more. We are doing more. We don't have a quota system in Brazil, but this is our way of trying to facilitate access to a career that has been considered only a career that would benefit, yes, a kind of an elite. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We have time for more questions. I just want to mention that one of these diplomats spent a year here at Princeton. He's a good friend of the Brazil Lab, Ernesto Mané Jr.
Oh, yes,
and he is a
yes.
fantastic diplomat working
He works
on
with me
nuclear.
in Washington. He
Oh,
works
yeah?
in
Yeah.
Washington. Yeah, he is.
Hi, I'm Paula Abreu. I work at McCarter Theater here in Princeton. I'll stand up. Sorry, I have 2 with me here. I've been working with culture for 15 years here in the US, first in New York, a summer stage, and I've been in Princeton for 2 years now. And naturally, being here for so long, a lot of my colleagues in Brazil ask for help coming here by the artists. And I've done a lot of like grassroots and help on the side and things like that. But one of the key issues I noticed, and I wanted to know if you agree or not with that, is the lack of collaboration with other states, or even between the embassies. I've noticed the artists, and I speak from the side of promoting music, which is what I do the most. They need multiple dates. They need a tour, right? And I feel that there's a lack of collaboration. I've been in the Northeast Coast for most of the time that I've been here, and even for myself, I don't work that much with that don't work with my West Coast colleagues. So is there an initiative that I'm not aware of, or what? Do you agree with this issue, or how can we improve multiple opportunities for artists to be here in the U.S.?
Yeah. That's a good question. It's a good question. It's something that we haven't found a way of, coordination is done through Brasilia, through the institute, the Cultural Institute in Brasilia, Instituto Guimarães Rosa. So whenever they promote an artist, a musical program, they try to do it in a way that it would maximize the exposure of the artist but sometimes it's not possible because it's also very expensive. It's something that requires a lot of money, and we normally don't have that kind of money. And looking for sponsors is also something that is very complicated. Brazilian companies, they don't have this practice and this view that they should be sponsoring Brazilian artists, that it would help them, it would help the image and so on. So it's difficult. I don't know whether you have a better answer for that.
Well, you are right that the programs are, let's say, individual, separate, and it's really difficult. And as Ambassador said, we do not, I totally agree with you, we do not have much sponsorship. Instituto Guimarães Rosa does not have the kind of money that some institutes abroad have from other countries. But we do have individual programs that are in a certain way intense, and working in Miami and in Atlanta, San Francisco, and here in New York, and all those areas. We had activities in Miami, more than 100 cultural activities per year. And here in New York, I would say as well, more than 100. Of course, that many times we just give the institutional support, not money. And our money is, the Spanish say semilla. How do you say that?
Seed money.
Seed money.
Yeah.
But anyway, I would say that today we have a pretty important program, cultural program, especially in some cities like New York and Miami. San Francisco not, even because the West Coast, they do not have a focus on Brazil. I explored this, talked to the government in California, and they recognize, admit that the focus of California, West Coast, is or Asia, was Europe, maximum Mexico, so we do not have, except maybe for LA, but New York, Miami, Boston in some way, Atlanta in some way, but there is an important, but of course there is not a coordination, because as the ambassador said, it's really very expensive to have a program for the whole country.
Okay, so we have time for one more question, and I also have one. So,
Can I ask a question of a member of the audience? Yes, a former speaker just now, which is related to the topic we just talked about. All right. I would like to ask the representative from MacArthur Theater. Okay, I'm talking about the incredibly successful, enjoyable, enormous event that involved a Brazilian musician recently. As filas enormes, lotado, Caetano Veloso. Would you care to share your opinion of what happened?
Oh, Caetano.
That's a good one.
I don't know.
Thank you so much. I'm a little embarrassed because I don't want to take the spotlight, but it was a huge ordeal, and we didn't do it by ourselves. Of course, we had the support of Miqueias and Brazil Lab. It wouldn't have happened if we didn't have that. MacArthur has a 90-year history of bringing performing artists to Princeton, which is amazing, world-class, amazing artists. But the history of Brazilian artists is minimal. It basically didn't exist. And to make that change with an opportunity like Caetano Veloso, to convince them that Princeton is a place that they should visit. It took years and years of effort, even before. It's all about diplomacy, relationships, and all of that. And I appreciate you recognizing that, because most of the times that I try to build a tour, I'm trying now to work hard on a new artist to come here at least every year, every semester. The pushback that we get is that, oh, it's not a town that is big enough to have the audience, but it is. We need to develop that and not think only of Brazilians. Think of the whole New Jersey state, for example. So thank you. Support and validation like that, those are very important, and I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
So I will use my power as moderator and ask the last question. And I want to hear more about your relation to your career as a diplomat in terms of time and temporality. I think, given that we all know we are living in a world that is affected by climate change, and climate change goes beyond nation states, which are the center of diplomacy, right? You have diplomacy between nation states, and perhaps that's why it's so difficult to talk about climate change and diplomacy at the same time, because it's a common, but at the same time, everyone has its own solutions. But extreme weather events are more common now in the US and Brazil, and we just saw floodings here in the US and both in Brazil. For us on this side, I think we were a little bit sad that the United States didn't help more Brazil this time, given that, compared to other states, I feel that at least that's the news that came out. The support was not that strong. But I was thinking more in terms of your role as a diplomat, and in terms of how you think and reflect on your career and your impact in the world in the long time. Because we are living also in a world that we are talking about elections. Everything changes tomorrow. We get news on Twitter. However, diplomacy, we are talking about 200 years of relations here. So how do you relate to what you do as a diplomat now has an impact that is long-lasting and will have effects, especially when we think about climate change?
Well, that's a
Easy
difficult
question.
difficult answer.
No, we have a little bit more, so I left 7 minutes.
You don't have Twitter in Brazil anymore, so
Yeah.
Well, I don't reflect much about my career. I just do
Okay.
what I have to do.
Yeah, that's good.
But but what I think is that it's very difficult to think of one's role, because it's really, for us, it's a number of people working together, and whenever I'm doing something, I'm not alone. So I don't think about my contribution. I hope I am contributing, But it's a collective effort. It's not an individual, which is a good excuse also.
Good.
Yeah.
And this question comes from a historian, which is, and I study diplomacy, so that's why. I mean, I'm doing my little lab here, asking how a diplomat feels about her actions.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Maybe I'll think about it when I retire.
Okay, then I will come interview
write
you.
my memoirs.
Okay, yeah, count on me on that. So thank you. It was such an honor to have Ambassador Viotti and Ambassador Daunio here with us. Thank you, Brian, for joining us today, and thank you all for being here in such a special occasion. In the name of the Brazil Lab, I thank you for your presence, and if you want to join other events, they are all open to the public. Just go to our website, and you are more than welcome to email us from this site as well. So thank you so much, and a last round of applause for our distinguished guests.